I have no other cards. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on this issue? Okay, seeing none. All right, we'll bring it back to the board. Where's Mr. Porter? Oh, there you are. Did you have any other follow-up at all? You're done. Okay.
Can I ask
Sure.
Mr. Porter?
Supervisor Horsley?
First of all, I live in Emerald Hills, and I never knew what those asphalt ditches were for. Now I know. It's to eliminate spraying. But one of the recommendations then is an alternate to eliminate coastal zone spraying, to only triage roads with a limited spot spraying, and with a priority on site distances, and then you're talking about paving ditches long-term, if permitted, similar to Emerald Hills. Have you also looked, and one of the recommendations is seeding with native grasses, and I assume you're going to proceed with that. Have you looked at organic compounds? I mean, I know I've looked around and I've heard about things like vinegar, and it apparently doesn't work, but are there organic compounds that we can use or have investigated?
Sure, through the President. We have an IPM specialist that we retain that annually looks at alternate methods and alternate treatment strategies for essentially spraying for weeds.
Yeah.
So you mentioned we've looked at some substances such as vinegar, highly caustic. It really eats away at our equipment. So the answer to your question is yes. We're constantly evaluating what we're using in order to use the least toxic substances.
Mr. Porter, alternate number 2 or strategy number 2 is implementation of weed management, which eliminates spraying within the coastal zone boundary. What about the bayside? I mean, could we include? I mean, I would like to include the bayside in number 2 and begin a program of eliminating herbicides in this county as quickly as possible. But you didn't give us that alternative.
That is certainly an option for the board. We receive the most complaints, and the most places that we mow are on the coast side. On the bay side, those are primarily urbanized areas with some exceptions. What our emphasis on was to hit the areas on the coast side where we've been receiving the most comments from the public, as well as those areas where, as people have mentioned, their water sources are typically surface water, creeks, or wells. On the bay side, you have a lot more of an urbanized situation where your water supplied in different ways.
But the herbicides still enter the air and enter the ground.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
If it's the wish of this board, we'll do what the board approves. And if that is eliminating spraying on both sides, that's what we'll do.
Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you.
Supervisor Pine.
Yeah, I do think we should. I'd like to propose an alternative 3, which would be the elimination of broadcast spraying, with the exception of the airports and the spot spraying for invasives. The risk of chemicals is a great concern to me. The science is very ambiguous, but I think there's a couple of things we do know or give me concern. There's been tremendous growth in childhood neurological disorders, which more and more are being linked to chemicals. We've seen our legislature constantly pass new laws to try to reduce exposure of children to chemicals. We know that chemicals are much more toxic to amphibians and frogs than they are to humans. We know that the combination of spraying and mowing can lead to fairly substantial erosion issues. And as has been pointed out, we have recognized very strongly in the county that we don't like the use of herbicides. First off, of course, we have stopped doing it in Pescadero in the early 90s and in other areas. We have an integrated pest management and water pollution prevention guideline that frowns on herbicides. We have watershed protection maintenance standards that frown upon herbicides. We are vigorously promoting organic farming through our Food System Alliance, obviously frowning on herbicides. And one thing that only kind of came into mind recently, but I think it's important, is if we don't take this approach, we have a very inequitable situation in that today and for many years we haven't sprayed in lots of areas. So I'm not sure how we can justify that to the 600 petition signers in other parts of the county that, we our prior boards have seen that it was important to eliminate these herbicides, but we're not doing that part of the county, but not your part of the county. Now, the budget is a problem at every issue we face. And so this is what I think what we ought to do, again, is stop the broadcast spraying. We should put a challenge to the Department of Public Works to do as much as they possibly can with their budget. And one thing, as a new supervisor, the cost of doing business by the county, by all our departments, is extraordinary. And every time we hear about it, and this is not a particular critique of the Department of Public Works, but it just takes your breath away. So I think we ought to put a challenge to the Department of Public Works to really think outside of the box here, which of course is easy thing to say, harder to do, but some specific suggestions. Part-time help in the summers. This inmate program has to be brought to ground. It sounds very promising. I also think, frankly, that we should send a letter to every homeowner who has property adjacent to a county road. They have the right today to opt out. I think we should ask them to voluntarily maintain or reduce weeds on their roads. And if a year from now we see weeds all over the place, and 1% of the residents took responsibility, that may affect my thinking. I think that we're long past the time where we can do everything just with the government. And the planting of native grasses is another thing. And finally, we have to prioritize. We should prioritize in the Pescadero area as well, with the focus on safety, fire reduction, and road maintenance. And come back in a year and let's look at it. If there's 10-foot weeds, and then despite my great concern about these chemicals, I can't have people getting in car accidents either, and I can't have fires, burning down forests. But I'm not persuaded that with $510,000 and really an aggressive approach or new approaches, and with a real passion and eagerness to be a leader by reducing herbicides, that the staff that we have can't accomplish an awful lot. But it won't be the same. There will be more weeds. I don't know how many more. But I'd like to put that challenge forward to them and continue this moratorium for at least another year.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pine.
Oh, I had one final point, I'm sorry. And this is another important one, I guess. One of the other things that struck me is, Caltrans likes to follow our lead. And when we put in place the moratorium, Caltrans followed. And I hear shaking head. Well, anyway, the press reports indicate that they have followed. I know according to the Almanac, they decided not to do any spraying through this date of this meeting, waiting to see what decision this board would make. So they have followed our lead, at least in part, and I suspect that there'll be considerable pressure on them to continue to follow our lead. So we could also potentially reduce or eliminate herbicides on the state roads.
Supervisor Groom.
I just would like to add that, we pride ourselves on all of the things that we do in this county to be a healthy county. We have weight management programs, and we have asthma reduction programs, and we have extraordinary prenatal care programs. And yet we know that spraying can increase the chances of asthma, that children and seniors that have asthma are deeply affected by chemicals in the air, and yet, so I think that's another reason why that we should stop spraying, because of the emphasis that we have placed on being a healthy county and the amount of money that we spend in our health department budget so that we will be a healthy county.
Thank you, Supervisor Groom. Supervisor Horsley.
I do think we probably will continue to do spraying for invasive plants. So, for example, one of the plants that really I find drives me nuts is that pampas grass that's all over the place. But I concur with Supervisor Pine and Supervisor Groom as well that we really really should stop this broadside or broadcast spraying of herbicides. But I also want to thank all of the people who have sent me voluminous letters, especially Patty Mayall, who's been really a champion for this for a long period of time. And I think it really, we are elected to represent people, and the coastside people have been pretty clear that they don't want spraying to continue. So I concur with Supervisor Pine. I don't know if that was a motion on your part. If it was, I would second it.
Okay, is it my turn? Say something. First off, I agree. I think the time has come. Over time, we learn more and more and more and more about things that affect us and affect our children. And we've seen it with other chemicals. We never know quite what causes cancer. We never know quite what causes some asthma and someone that never had it growing up. And I think it's time for us to take that leap, to eliminate the broadcast spraying. I know there will be some spot spraying. We understand. I think everybody understands there is a need for some of that. I do understand our airports. I mean, that is a huge issue with the geese and the birds. I mean, we at some point you have to look at the dangers of not spraying in an area like that. But those are the exceptions to the rule rather than the rule. So I would like to see, I think we're saying that what Mr. Pine had indicated was somewhat of a motion. I'm not sure exactly how you want to craft that, but I do think we've heard the residents loud and clear, but I would like to add one thing that Carol said. I think, you can't look at just the coast side, you have to look at the entire county. And, the fact that some have stepped forward and others have not doesn't make it better. It means you've paid more attention to it maybe than other areas. So I think we need to at least move forward and look at the Bayside as well on this. I do agree, though, with Mr. Pine in the sense that we're going to have to figure out how much we can do with the dollars we have. And we are going to have to look at, how can we get additional help to do some of the work that we're looking to do. And I think, as you know, I've been working a lot on this whole issue around jobs for inmates, to give them some job skills and things like that. This may be a good opportunity to do that. We're already doing it with Caltrans. And they're hiring them for some things. I don't know whether this could be included or this could just be a separate program we have, but I do think there's opportunities here. So I just wanted to have an opportunity to say that and see if we can move this forward.
So yes, just to put the recommendation in the form of a motion. So I move that the County of San Mateo eliminate all broadcast spraying with the exception of the 2 airports and use spot spraying for invasives only, and that the Department of Public Works report back to the board in 12 to 15 months with a report on how this new policy has worked out.
Could I ask a question? I guess there's a part of me that's a little concerned that we report out in a year. We've got this rainy season that's hitting us today. I wonder if maybe 4 to 6 months just to have a check-in as to how it's going, and if we need to put additional resources or more people out there to another program. I just think we need to kind of take a look at it and not maybe wait quite so long.
We'll consider that part of the motion.
And do we need to include the entire county? Because all of our paperwork is...
That was the entire county.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Mr. Malpe, you look like you were going to ask a question. You're good. Okay. That's in the form of a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Let's do a roll call.
President Tissier,
Aye.
Supervisor Pine,
Aye.
Supervisor Groom,
Yes.
Supervisor Horsley,
Aye.
Supervisor Jacobs Gibson.
Ms. Gibson had to leave, so. Okay. Well, thank you very much. That motion passes. And thank you all for your input on this issue. Okay. We are